there is something incredibly special about just a good book. Hey everyone, welcome back to Andrew's Wizardly Reads, and as always guys, I am Andrew, and today guys, we are here for another book review. But before we get into this book review, please do me a favor and like this video and subscribe to the channel, as it does help the channel grow. And you can check the description box down below for links to all my social media, including information about my Discord, Patreon, Amazon wishlist, what have you. It's all there for you to explore. Now the book we are talking about today is A Threat of Shadows. This is book 1 in the Keeper. I believe this is Chronicles by J.A. Andrews, and this is the Kickstarter edition. I backed this Kickstarter book unread. I'd never even read any J.A. Andrews, and I took a risk. And let me tell you what, it paid off really well. Hey, this is a gorgeous copy. So, I think you can still get these as the Kickstarters are ongoing. I know book 2's Kickstarter is already done. I've got that on the way. Super excited for that. But I believe when the third one drops as well, because it's a trilogy, that you'll be able to get this kind of edition. It's really nice. I really enjoyed this. But anyway, that's enough about the Kickstarter edition. This is J.A. Andrews' debut. I believe it came out in 2018, and since then, I believe she's working on her third trilogy set in the world of the Keepers. And what's fascinating is, from what I understand, each book is basically a standalone, but they're all kind of connected. So book 2 is going to be following a character who's mentioned in book 1, but is missing. And so I'm very excited to kind of dive in and explore that. I might be reading that when my Kickstarter edition shows up, because this was actually a lot of fun to read from. Anyway, what is this about? Essentially, we have an order of keepers. These are kind of like magical adjacent librarians. And they kind of sit in their wealth of knowledge, and they read books, and they don't really go out super much. There's not a lot of them. And Ulrich, our main character, is basically coming home after being away from a long time. He's kind of coming home a little bit in disgrace. Something has happened in the recent past where he got married, which keepers don't normally do, and then his wife got poisoned by a kind of creature that doesn't have an antidote, or a commonly known antidote, and he's desperately trying to find this antidote. He's done a lot of things he's not really proud of. He doesn't know if he's really worthy of the name Keeper anymore, because he's done some really kind of just unforgivable things to try and save Evangeline's life. She was poisoned on accident in the performance of his duties by a troop of people who'd covered their arrows in just tons of different poisons. They were just like, we're going to put all the poison on this just to make sure it works. And a rock snake, they coated in that, and they didn't have the antidote, and so now she's kind of in stasis. He's got her in a magical stasis. He's pulled out her vital, which is kind of her life energy, and he wears it in a rock around his neck, and he's just trying to buy her time so he can find this cure. And I'm not going to get into the whole magic system or what vital is. It's not really necessary to what the story is. Essentially, basically, Ulrich comes home, and he discovers that there was a keeper 100 years ago who had an antidote for this. And he was also a fallen keeper, and he has stored this knowledge on how to cure this poison or this venom in a different repository of knowledge called a wellstone. The keepers have a wellstone, but he didn't store his knowledge in the keeper's wellstone. He stored it in his own personal wellstone, and now Ulrich has to go and find it. And basically what ends up happening is Ulrich goes on this quest. So basically what Ulrich decides to do, he's like, I'm going to go find that because I need this cure to save my wife's life, and the keepers be damned. And he kind of leaves off again. And in his research, he kind of discovers that this old keeper by the name of Corden, he was bad enough that through the years, they've named a town after him. It's called Corden's Blight. Anyway, on his journey to Corden's Blight to try and hopefully find this lost treasure, he runs into a ragtag band of, I'm not going to say misfits, but they're this really dysfunctional family. There's a blacksmith whose name I don't remember. There's a girl that the blacksmith likes. I believe her name was Millie. So they don't really get expounded on too much, but the ones that we're going to focus on, there's an elf by the name of Ada, and a dwarf by the name of Douglin, and a wizard by the name of Gustav. Gustav is this old, kind of not super powerful wizard, and Ulrich thinks he's a charlatan. and he kind of worms his way into this group. And then we kind of go on this adventure. Things go awry. There's dragons. There's evil dark lords. I believe his name was Malin. Malin is the big bad of the story. Malin kind of disappeared from the world 8 years ago. He is believed dead, defeated by the elves. And we're going to kind of dive into that a little bit. Anyway, what I love about this is just how everything seemed to fit so perfectly. It all meshed really well. Other than the blacksmith character and his kind of love interest, everybody else seems to be really fleshed out. Like Douglin, we get to kind of dive into his heritage a little bit without getting too deep into detail. And this just all really kind of is executed classic fantasy with a modern twist on it that I really, really appreciated. J.A. Andrews has created a world and a cast of characters that I would not mind coming back and revisiting again in the future. Now, I know book 1 is its own standalone thing, and book 2 we follow somebody else. I don't know what book 3 is, but you can rest assured I'm going to find out. Now, I also did do the audiobook, and I know you're going to say, Andrew, you don't like Tim Gerald Reynolds. You would be normally correct, but what I decided to do here with this one is I slowed down Tim Gerald Reynolds. Usually I listen to audiobooks at 1.5 speed. I slowed it down to 1.25, and you know what? That actually ended up working really well for me, and I really enjoyed Tim Gerald Reynolds' performance in this one. So, for somebody who doesn't like Tim Gerald Reynolds, I think he did an amazing performance on A Thread of Shadows. So, for my audiobook people, there is that little nugget of information. I just liked the pacing. I liked the feel of the world. It was recognizable enough that I didn't really have to do any sort of like, oh, what's this fantasy creature look like? It's like elves, dwarves, dragons, wizards. Cool. Gotcha. It was descriptive enough to make my imagination flourish. It was fresh enough to keep me interested. Overall, I would give this probably a 4.5 or a 5 out of 5. I don't know where I sit with it because I just really, really enjoyed the experience. I enjoyed the experience enough to pretty much go onto my Amazon wishlist and add all of J.A. Andrews' books onto my wishlist so that I can purchase them later down the road because I want to read more J.A. Andrews. This is an author that I think I'm going to dive headlong into. I want to collect all of her works. I want to know more about this world. I want to go on more adventures. I really, really thought that even though I sometimes like to treat myself to classic fantasy, it wasn't going to be anything I was ever going to give more than 3.5 stars to going forward into the future. I thought I had outgrown that as a reader, and I'm just wrong because this goes to show that classic fantasy can be done just beautifully and so incredibly well. I really want to explore more of J.A. Andrews. Thread of Shadows was it was such a fun, easy, refreshing, and rewarding read. I give this one a high recommend to lovers of classic fantasy. Like if you've been craving more dwarves, you've been craving more elves, you've been craving just a little sprinkling of freshening up in those specific tropes, man, this one does it in spades. It's really, really well done. And I can see why it is so well received. This is a rather popular indie self-pub fantasy, and yet at the same time, I think it could be more popular just because it was done that well. I really enjoyed the themes here. We've got just this kind of magic system of Vital, which I'm not going to get into too much, but like using life essence and the way it can kind of be hoarded and passed on to people and what happens with the elves. Like all of this stuff is just very interesting to explore. I thought it was done really, really well. And it was funny because I was kind of on Twitter going, hey, I'm really enjoying this. And J.A. Andrews was like, oh, I really liked Ulrich. That was my first book and it was a little rough. And I'm like, I mean, what do you mean by a little rough? Because other than not expounding on the blacksmith and his love interest, everything else I have no complaints. Like we meet a queen in this story and I thought she was written really, really well. We get into some just like a taste of politics, and I thought those politics were interesting and rewarding without having to take over the entire book. Like, I just loved the kind of subplot of the love story and Ulrich doing anything and everything he can to save his wife's life, all the while falling in with this band of misfits and then kind of changing from band of misfits into found family. I really, really enjoyed A Threat of Shadows, and I think you should do yourself a favor and check this one out. I do know the audiobook is compiled into, you can spend 1 credit on Audible and get all 3 of the trilogy, or you can buy the trilogy as a bind-up on paperback. There are multiple ways to consume and acquire the story, and I just highly recommend that you do so. This one was a treat. That said, guys, that's all I've really got to say on The Threat of Shadows. Let me know in the comments down below if this sounds interesting, or do you want me to dive in even further into this world or do some spoiler talks? I can 100% do that. Please let me know in the comments down below. But that's all I've really got for you today, guys. So till next time, peace out, stay magical, bye. And as always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons. So thank you for supporting my passion and my hobby. It means the world to me.